Adam Carolla Show presents Meghan McCain's birthday cocktail party for October 23rd. Let's see who's invited. Let's welcome to the party Johnny Carson, Brazilian soccer legend Pele. We welcome American football coach and the namesake of the Heisman Trophy, John Heisman. American novelist Michael Crichton is here. Filmmaker Ang Lee. Khaleesi Amelia Clark. Ryan Reynolds is here. A big welcome to Dwight Yoakam and Weird Al Yankovic. And maybe the guy that everybody wants to talk to, the medical reporter for CNN, Sanjay Gupta. Meghan McCain is on the Adam Carolla Show.
Well, Meghan McCain is on the program. Good to see you, my dear.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I was actually, do you remember the last time we were, I think, in a room together was the Jay Leno Show? Do you remember this?
Yes, somebody reminded me of this moments before the mics got hot, which is Jay, probably after he switched to 10 o'clock, he would kind of change the format a little, and we were part of the newer format.
Yeah. And it was actually really fun. I mean, I was much younger than this. Is like, I think over 10 years ago, but it was like uncool. Like his show was uncool because he and Conan had that feud. But I just remember it was you and Jim Norton and Diablo Cody and me. And I don't remember anything else other than I enjoyed myself. But that's the last time I saw you in person.
I learned a lot, I mean, from doing that show, and I just did a show with Leno over the weekend, so just a few days ago, and I like working with Jay a lot. But one of the things I really learned from that show, and you can speak to that very poignantly because you worked on The View for almost 4 years, you learn probably the most about a show, not from watching it, but from hanging around backstage 45 minutes before the show begins. And because it's kind of pressure time and it's a pressure cooker time and people are very much involved. And I always liked Jay's demeanor. Jay would do a couple of things. He would come in and talk to the guests or the guest host or whoever before the show and go, man, just have a good time out there, whatever. But also, like, when we'd go out on stage and go through run-throughs, his writers would go like, Jay, don't do it that way. It's not funny. Do it this way. It's funny. And he'd go, all right, I'll do it your way. And I thought a lot of guys don't react that way when you tell them, when you kind of give them marching orders.
I had the best time working with him. He had me on his show a lot, which I was probably like way too young and green to be invited on that show when he did. And I remember he had the J bar too, which was like you could drink alcohol and they would serve drinks, remember, backstage?
They'd roll a cart right and they just park it right in between the two green room guest rooms and they'd go, help yourself.
Yeah. And I just remember if I ever had a show, which, you know, the likelihood of that is very small, but if I ever had like a show like that, that's the backstage vibe I would want to emulate because it was always really fun and his staff loved him and probably still does love him. And I had a great time doing that. And I had a great time backstage. And he was I remember like during Me Too, there were all these stories about like, you know, comedians and whatever. And I was like, Jay Leno was the most, like, a gentleman is putting it like mildly. He was like the most kind, respectful. And I was like 26, like 25, 24, something like that. And he was like, I have nothing but wonderful things to say to him. And obviously getting to know you and Jim Norton and everyone, I was like way out of my league at that time. But it's a really nice memory of my career.
Well, the thing that just popped in my head were you're talking about Me Too and Jay Leno, two Jay Leno sort of Me Too stories, one old and the other one is 2 days old. Once I was doing a pre-interview with this guy and I was like joking around, which was, I wear a wedding ring unless I go on the road, in which case, obviously, I take the wedding ring off. I was making a joke and it got back to Jay, and Jay was concerned. Like, he was concerned. I'm talking about a comedian. And then a couple of days ago, we're sitting in the green room of the club before we went out, and he went, and this speaks of the sort of congenial, courteous nature of Jay Leno, he goes, "Hey, Adam, what's going on? Are you getting divorced?" And I said, "Yeah, I am getting divorced." And he said, "Oh," he said, "I was going to make a couple of jokes, about my wife and about me and, being married for 41 years. Is that okay? Is that all right?" I'm like, "Of course, Jay, you're a comedian. Everyone gets divorced. I mean, everything's on the table." Yeah. But the fact that he thought it might bum me out or put me in a mood or something, just the fact that he checked speaks to the kind of gentleman that Jay Leno is. But so for you, probably didn't have that same experience backstage at The View. But I don't know. I mean, there was a lot of fighting going on camera, but what was it like off camera at The View?
Well, had you ever been a guest on The View?
Yes, probably twice. Surely back in the day, back when The View was just, we're going to sit around and talk about anything. At some point, like the Sierra Club and everything else, it just took a turn for the political. And then at a certain point, I was not welcome back anymore. But I had done it a couple of times.
Did you do it at a time when it was political or not?
No, I do not think I did.
I mean, people are really curious now because I left recently. But I wrote this memoir, which is why I'm on your show right now. And thank you for having me, called Bad Republican. And I go through a few things backstage that happened that were the craziest. And the one that sticks out the most is when Judge Jeanine Pirro from Fox News was on. And she got in this huge fight with Whoopi on air. And it was something about Trump. I don't remember now. And Judge Jeanine Pirro got really angry and they started screaming at each other. And if you watch the clip, they're both physically up at each other on the table, they're getting up out of their chair. And Judge Jeanine Pirro, when they went to commercial break, she ripped her microphone off, ripped the plug out of her and threw it at me and goes, and can I swear on the show?
Go ahead.
And she goes, "You cocksuckers, you cocksuckers. I knew this was going to happen, you cocksuckers." And I just was like, "I'm sorry." I didn't know it. And it was so crazy. And then she went backstage with Whoopi, and the set is a half oval. And then there was a tiny little backstage area where you would walk back to get back. And I just heard it was the cartoon of screaming and tumbling. It was just yelling and noise and people freaking out and screaming. And I went to walk back and there was a security guard standing there. And I was like, "Can I go back?" And he just goes, he shakes his head and looks down. He goes, and I was like, "Okay." And then I was walking out onto the set and I was trying to distract the audience because obviously you could hear it. And it was just wild. And it's still the most wild on set, on show experience I ever had. And then Judge Jeanine went on Fox News and was like, "It was very calm." And I said, "Whoopi, you're wrong." And I was like, "What in the fuck?" That's not what happened at all. So there were days like that. And then there were days where it was just boring and mellow. And it just depends what guest was happening and what mood everyone was in.
Did you have a relationship or friendship with any of the ladies beyond the actual work obligation of it? I mean, there's such a thing. I told people, I told people last week or 2 weeks ago, I was literally in Nashville doing a Ben Shapiro Daily Wire thing that took place on a Tuesday night at about 9:30 at night. And the following day, less than 24 hours later, I was at a Jimmy Kimmel kind of cocktail Hollywood party with a completely different ilk of human being. And we're getting along fine. I live in Hollywood. I have plenty of friends I disagree with politically. We get along fine. There's a version of it that can work and does work. But did you experience any of that when you were at The View?
Yeah, I have some friends. Honestly, some of the crew members that work on the show, maybe because the ones that I'm friends with are conservative. I'm still pretty close with them. I still use The View's stylists and a lot of the hair and makeup people when I'm in New York. And Sunny, who's one of the co-hosts, I'm still legitimately friends with. But past that, I just was such an oddball there in that environment. It's no one had ever met. It's felt like no one had ever been around a Republican before, or my personality. I'm very sort of aggressive and alpha. And that didn't bode well, because I think when you come into a franchise show, they expect you to be kind of like meek and deferential. And I was like, you hired me to help whip this fucking place into shape, and I'm here to do it. Because at the time it wasn't doing as well as I don't know what it's doing like now, but when I went on for 4 years, in the 4 years that it transpired since I came on. So I just always felt like I was there to do a job, and I was not there to be best friends with like the crew and the staff. And the second week I got there, stories started leaking about how horrible I was and like how much everybody hated me. So I had an innate distrust in that environment, just thinking, I'm going to like, I don't know, go down the hall and get eggs at the breakfast table, and it's going to be on the internet.
Was there kind of a low-grade depression or anxiety or something sort of going into that environment every day? I mean, I think we've all had work environments that we thought were sort of negative, and it didn't prevent us from doing our jobs. But when you then get out of it and you look back on it, do you realize that, oh, yeah, it was sort of like being in a bad relationship where there's no physical abuse or anything, but just like, oh, that was kind of a low-grade depression, anxiety that I was experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, I had postpartum anxiety. I was diagnosed with it after I had my baby last year. And so I was like diagnosed with, a version of, I don't know if it's depression, but it's a condition that happens after you have a baby sometimes. And then going back into that environment exacerbated it. I tell this story in the Audible that's out, that I ran into Rosie O'Donnell at a Broadway opening for the play Frozen, Disney play. And she came up to me and she just said, how is the view going? And I said, like it's going. And she said, it's so much less fun than it should be. And she like stared at me and said that. And I was like, huh. And she was like, that's a show that should be a blast. And it's huge. And it's this like juggernaut and all these people are on it. And it's not fun at all. And I was like, that's actually the perfect take on it, that for everything it should be, it's not fun at all. And then when I was leaving and I started telling people that worked on the show that I just have to have, some respect and joy and balance and like respect for my beliefs, and, in my life going forward. The main takeaway from the people who stayed is this has got to start being fun, because television's fun. Like, I don't want a real job where I have to like work 9 to 5. It's a privilege to be able to talk for a living. So, I mean, how do you handle it? Because you've been on so many shows, obviously throughout your career, where people are curious about backstage dynamics. It's a weird thing, because it's like people want to know about these relationships, and it's public, but it's also private. And I still sort of have a hard time navigating it.
My policy is sort of, if it's true, then you're not telling tales out of school per se. Like, it's one thing to impugn somebody's character through sort of manufacturing things. And it's just kind of another thing if that person is that person, or acted that way or engaged in that behavior. So, I've always kind of had a policy, and for right or for wrong, I'll speak about my parents. I'm not a big fan of my parents. Now, I'm not allowed to make things up about my parents. That's wrong. But if you ask me about my parents, I'll tell you about my parents. And then people will say, why are you talking shit about your parents? And I'm not really talking shit about them. I'm reporting how they were and who they were. And that's kind of up to them. It's sort of like, hey, police officer, why'd you give that guy a DUI ticket? And it's like, well, because he chose to drink and then drive. Yeah, but why'd you do it? It's like, it wasn't really me. It was sort of them. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I've worked for many years with Jimmy Kimmel, and I've worked for many years with Dr. Drew, and I've many people I've worked with for multiple seasons on multiple shows and multiple years. And I will say plenty of good things about those people. I have done Leno, and I will tell you great things about, just as you have at the top of the show, about what it's like behind the scenes when you do Leno. When you do Letterman, it is not the same environment. Not at all. Everyone is scared shitless who works at Letterman. Yeah. Now, that can make me someone who's just sort of slinging shade, or I can just be a reporter of what I experienced at each show. And
That makes sense.
As long as you're accurately reporting to me, then you're under the umbrella of the Constitution and you can speak your mind.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also didn't want to be a liar. I didn't want to be like one of those people who, socially, if I had a drink with you or whatever, someone's like, "How was the view?" And I'm like, it was awful and intense. A lot of times, a lot of people lie about their experiences in TV in general. Like it's always just the most beautiful, wonderful place. And I worked at MSNBC, Fox. I worked on a startup show called Pivot, a network that doesn't exist anymore that Jeff Skoll started. And iHeartRadio, I did radio for many years. And I worked at all these different conglomerates. Like media is an insane, gnarly environment. And some of the most neurotic, horrible people I've ever met in my life work in it. And juxtapose the most wonderful, creative, provocative, interesting people. And it's like it brings out the best people and the worst people. And that's just my anecdotal experience.
Yeah, or it brings out the best and the worst in sort of the same people sometimes. But yes, I totally agree. And I also have this thing. It's kind of anytime Henry Winkler's name comes up, everyone goes, "Oh, he's the greatest guy in the world." And my feeling is if we don't accurately report on who the douchebags are, then, and everyone's just good, then Henry Winkler just joins the group of everyone who's good. And we should be more distinctive. So my feeling is like Letterman seemed like a bad environment and Leno seemed like a good environment. But if I say Letterman was a great environment, then Leno's not a great environment because they're both just the same at this point. So you're right. You guys should have been having fun. Everyone's getting paid a lot. The hours are pretty decent. I don't know what time you guys, what the schedule is, but, you have the rest of the day to go about your day. Do you think that Whoopi and Joy, and I bring them up because they seem like unhappy people, and unhappy people are very difficult to be happy around. You can have plenty of disagreements with happy people, but when you're done disagreeing, they go back to being happy and you go back to being happy. Do they seem, in your estimation, to be unhappy people?
It was a really unhappy time. Like the 4 years are the Trump years. And if you're a liberal, it's, and they're not even, I would describe them as very, very progressive, like almost radically progressive, very, I think, out of touch with mainstream Democrat values. Like I would describe them as like AOC liberal, hyper progressive people. So I think it was just a time when you're a person who's talking about politics on TV, which is what they do, you're unhappy because of the state of the world. And I talk about this in my book that I felt like the more Trump gained power, the more popular he got, the more insane his behavior got in different instances, that I was just like an easy punching bag in a lot of ways. And I honestly, it's hard to answer that question, Adam, because even after 4 years of working with them, I don't feel like I know them. And that's another weird thing to say. Like, I don't really know these people. You are a peg on a carousel brought in to do your job and then leave and come. And my biggest, one of my biggest criticisms of the show is that there's no morale and there's no bonding and and I think in order to do anything well, let alone do a show, you have to know someone personally, and they're just very busy and they've been doing it. Joy's been on the show 25 years and Whoopi's been on the show, I think 12, and they've been through a shit ton of co-hosts. So I was just, there's an expectation that you're going to come in and then you're going to leave. So I still don't feel like I know those women, which is kind of sad.
Well, we all know your father and we all knew, how you grew up. And everybody has, great respect for your father because of his history and Hanoi Hilton and all the crazy. I know probably more about him than most because I became very interested in. Everyone else knows him as a guy who was shot down, I don't know, maybe in Mig Alley or something, ends up at the Hanoi Hilton, and you can tell us what you know. But I remember a training flight where he crashed an airplane and being on the forestall, which was one of the probably the biggest fire that's ever been on a aircraft carrier or any naval vessel, American naval vessel ever. And the sort of insanity of that story as well. I mean, he was on the deck in a plane getting ready to take off from an aircraft carrier when one of the other planes missile fired and either hit his airplane or his plane's missile malfunctioned and fired. Either way,
it was his plane.
His plane. Either way, he was on the deck. He was out of the canopy and standing on top of the plane and had to like jump off. There was fire, bombs were going off. I mean, that was the. Did he ever really get down and get into you with those stories? Yeah,
he did. He was very proud of the things he had been through. And sometimes it was in the context of, and this, I hope this doesn't sound like macabre, but I remember one time my boyfriend had broken up with me and I was just like so sad. And he was like, I was in prison 5.5 years. Like there are things in life that are worse and harder and more complicated. And there were times when it was very serious that he would be very emotional and talk about some of his stories and some of his experiences in prison. And then there were other times where he had a really great sense of humor about it. For some reason, I remember when I was growing up thinking he told us a story at Christmas time that he had like been given soup and there was a chicken leg in it, like just a raw chicken leg. And for some reason, we always like laughed that he had like tried to eat a raw chicken leg, which again, it's like dark, but funny. But when you're a kid, you like don't really process everything. Yeah, we talk. I mean, I wouldn't say it was like every day or like sitting and talking about like his crazy experiences in life, but he did. Yeah, he'd bring it up. And I was on the road with him a lot growing up, and I would hear him tell stories on the campaign trail at stumps and at events. And he was very comfortable with his history.
Yeah, I think the story goes, and I think part of why we admire him so much is that he probably could have gotten out of the Hanoi Hilton, the prison camp, earlier, but he chose to stay because his guys were still there.
My grandfather was an admiral. Yeah, my grandfather and my great-grandfather were famous admirals, and he could have, because he was like an admiral's son, they offered him early release, and he said no.
How long did he stay after they offered him the early release? Do you remember?
I think it was like 3 years. It was a while.
Yeah, not many would do that. I don't know if Don Jr. would stay for an extra 3 years.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard because his story was so amazing. When he died, it was just such this insane, obviously outpouring. He had 5 funerals. It was like this moment in American history where things really stopped. And I remember at the time thinking but he wasn't president, and he wasn't he always lost in the main things. He never became president, and he never, he was just a senator. But I think his stories and his mark in history and what he represented was sort of the end of an era and a generational era. And I think America mourned that and mourned what left with him. And I think he was almost bigger than a president. I think he'll be remembered much more fondly than many ex-presidents. And
yeah.
So, but it's a lot. I mean, people make fun of me because I talk about my dad when I'm asked, in situations like this, and they're like, she's obsessed with her dad and talks about it all the time. But I cannot leave my home and go buy a bagel without someone saying something nice about him or wanting to talk about him. And his impact is unbelievable. I mean, there's just no way to even describe it. He has somehow impacted anyone in any room likes him. There's a sort of a conspiracy theorist, Alex Jones type. It's very hard for me to find people who don't have something kind to say about him. And it's wonderful. And it just makes me miss him a lot.
Yeah, really, as you step back and look at it, if he became president, then half the country would probably hate him. So almost better that he remained in the position that he was in, because he's, his approval rating now amongst Americans or Americans involved with politics or whatever really between right and left, Democrat, Republican, probably he would get a higher score than, Abraham Lincoln, I think, at this point. So, but where do you, politically, where do you see us heading? What's your take on what's next?
What were you doing with Ben Shapiro? And it's interesting that you're someone in comedy and entertainment. Obviously, you said you live in Hollywood, who is, I assume you're center right or something along the spectrum if you're hanging out with Ben Shapiro. Do you get shit for that? Or do you have any issues? Like, because when I lived in LA, I really felt like my politics hindered me in a lot of spaces. Mm-hmm. Do you feel any ramifications for your politics, which I apologize, I don't know fully.
Yeah, I don't know if I know them fully either. The answer is well, a couple answers. One is people go like, has it hurt your career? And you go, I don't know. 'Cause it's kind of hard to tell because people make decisions in a room that you're not in. You know what I mean? So you submit a documentary and somebody at Sundance goes, fuck that guy. He's not getting his movie into Sundance. But they don't tell you your movie didn't get into Sundance, So you don't quantifiably know. At a certain point, patterns emerge. And at a certain point, you start to be able to go, well, maybe it's not helped career-wise. I basically have been saying the same thing for 25 years into a microphone, and it's things like, abortion, fine, gay marriage, fine, but I would like a border. I would like a presence at the border. And welfare, fine, and all the other versions of helping out those who need a helping hand, fine. But I don't want to pay 50% in taxes and then have someone wag their fucking finger at me every 10 seconds and want to know why I'm not paying my fair share. You can fuck off. So that's all. And family, like dads, you can't have kids out of wedlock and abandon that kid and expect the government to pay for that kid. We got to get the dads back into the picture. Girls don't get pregnant in high school. Get your education, wait till you get married, then start a family. I've been saying the same stuff because the stuff I've been saying is basically diet and exercise. I've just said, look, you want to lose weight, diet and exercise. And everyone keeps saying, well, what about Weight Watchers, fudge brownies with Accutane or something or whatever, with the sweetener. I think I did an acne medication there instead of a sweetener. But the point is this. I just say the same thing and I don't change. That's the thing. Now, the zeitgeist in the world around me has definitely changed, but I haven't. So now I'm de facto conservative, saying the same things that were not considered conservative 20 years ago or even 8 or 10 years ago. I mean, if you want to, you can go on the internet and find hours of footage of Biden and Obama and every other prominent Democrat going, we need to have a border. We need a secure border. People can't come into this country and just take up residence here. We need a vetting. It's all there. Mm-hmm. They changed their mind. I don't know why they changed their mind. I suspect it's for political gain, but I just never changed my mind. That's kind of where I am.
Well, it's wildly unpopular, open borders. Like statistically, there's plenty of data people can look up. And, when you see Chuck Todd saying that 72% of Americans think we're headed in the wrong direction, according to an NBC poll, those are like doomsday numbers for Democrats. So I think the culture war is impacting things really heavily. I think Republicans it's going to be like the red fucking wedding in midterms. I think it is going to be a bloodbath. I live in Virginia. I live right outside DC in Virginia. And there's this, governor's race going on. And I think it's really going to be an indicator to see if Youngkin can pull it off, who's the Republican candidate against McAuliffe. I think everything from the teachers unions to talking to parents like they shouldn't have a say in their children's education, to people just being exhausted with being policed on how they're allowed to interact and talk, and everything you already know. But I think it's finally having an impact. I think it's like finally reaching a level that people are pushing back, which is fascinating. You as a comedian, I mean, I'm a huge comedy fan, and my husband's a huge comedy fan. And we were actually, one of the things we bonded over on our second date was we're both huge Norm Macdonald fans. And I was very sad to hear of his passing. And we actually saw him live in Las Vegas, and my husband had interviewed him, and I just like loved his work. And I thought that he was like very irreverent and like sort of like spoke truth to power in this really interesting way. And I thought, like, to be a comedian in this moment, like you and like him, and comedians who have a long career, this is an interesting moment because you can be banned and canceled, and you can have your freedom of speech and satire taken away. And I think satire, particularly political satire, is really, really important. And this silencing of speech and comedy is, to me, like very dystopian. And I don't know how you feel as someone who does comedy. I'm assuming you agree, but it just feels scary to me, this level of censorship.
Agreed. And a quick correction. I said Accutane. I meant aspartame, I think, was the fake sweetener I was trying to think of.
I know what you're talking about.
5 minutes ago. It just, as a comedian, it was bugging me.
I knew what you were talking about.
Yes. Here's what's happening. So you were sort of saying, my relationship with Ben Shapiro and what that has done, to my standing in Hollywood. The thing about Hollywood and folks on the left, and I always try to modify it by saying libertarians are libertarians. Bill Maher's a libertarian. He's not a lefty. You know what I mean? Yeah. But Hollywood isn't run by libertarians. Hollywood is run by people who claim they're live and let live and libertarian, and they don't judge. They judge their fucking asses off. All they do is sit around all day and judge. The people who tell you you can't judge, the people who tell you can't judge a person by their gender or their race or their sexual proclivities, all those hypocrite assholes do is judge. That's all they do. And if you run afoul of them, they judge the shit out of you, and then they try to prevent you from working, which they're quite successful at. If you, in fact, host a dating show or a game show, the list goes on and on. They will remove you from your livelihood. They, who never stop complaining about McCarthyism, never stop attempting to practice McCarthyism. So they're insecure hypocrites. And frankly, a lot of them are dicks. Like, they're not nice people. They're not nearly as friendly as they try to come across as they care about everything, and their dogs are rescue, and, their pants are made of sustainable hemp seed or whatever. They're a bunch of blowhard douchebags. I don't have any time for them. Now, the good news is I have deemed myself funny, so I don't need to worry about my next gig that hopefully they'll hand out to me, because I figured out a long time ago they weren't going to hand out any gigs to me. I was going to have to create my own jobs and my own platforms and so on and so forth. What the idiots on the left in Hollywood didn't realize, and what they'd sort of done, is they'd given birth to guys like Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire. Their greatest nightmare they created.
Yeah.
They created their greatest nightmare by clamping down so hard on what jokes could be told and what speech could be spoken in their own town with all their legacy media and all the traditional Netflix or HBOs or anything. Those guys got so far left and clamped down and punished creative types so hard that they gave a platform to Ben Shapiro, the Daily Wire, and many other examples. And those guys popped up and said, well, if half the country is being called deplorable, we'll then create entertainment for half the country. And if you take a look at, CNN's ratings, they're tanking. So they did it. My relationship with Netflix or HBO or Sundance or Tribeca or whatever it is I'm dealing with is blow me. I'll just go over to the Daily Wire and get paid over there. That's the way I think of it. And I would have been happy to hang out here and work with Netflix or HBO or whomever, but they have decided that I was dangerous because I disagreed with them on some issues. Not all, not legalization of marijuana, gay marriage, or many other things. But on a couple of issues, I disagreed with them. That's way too much for them. And that's the way they roll. And my thing is I'm not a game show host. I'm a comedian. I get to say what I want. And I've never altered from that course.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And Ben Shapiro has he has like a juggernaut. He has what he has built over there. I mean, they're creating a movie right now. It's incredible to see the Daily Wire and how huge it is now. And, I really like a lot of things he says. I don't agree with everything, but I think he's like a really compelling voice. I don't know. What's interesting to me right now is obviously I'm not working on The View anymore. And there are people that have approached my agent and they're like, in theory, she would be good, but we're just not working with conservatives right now. Like, this is not a time for conservatives. And I just can't imagine any other situation where you can say, like, I'm just not hiring liberal. Like, if I was hiring someone to work with me, I'm just not hiring liberals right now. It's such an insane thing to be told, and to be told in a forum, like it would be for a job or something. And I do always wonder, like, people like CNN, and I have one friend who works on CNN. I have one friend that works on CNN, but their ratings are such dog shit. Like, I think I just read that it's like less than 300,000 people watch Brian Stelter. It's like nothing. Like, more people like follow me on Instagram by a lot. How are the economics of it working out? Like, at certain point, don't you have to make money as a network? That's what I don't understand, is you just rather prove a political point and lose money and an audience than dare speak to someone in the middle. I don't understand it.
It's an interesting mindset, and I do voice the same concerns, although I don't give a shit about CNN, but I do go, to what end? What is the business model? I mean, you guys can check the ratings, and I realize there is something, and it's a quality, and you can tell me if you vibe with this or not, if you've experienced it. One of the qualities for being pretty hard left is you never take your foot off the accelerator, even if the car is going off the fucking cliff. Like, imagine hearing, so we'll just go with the Rashida Tlaib or AOC or anyone in the squad. Imagine hearing the term, well, maybe I was wrong about X, Y, or Z, global warming or the border or whatever. Or perhaps I'd overstated it a little too much. Or, I've reconsidered my position. They never reconsider anything. They triple down. Look at CNN. CNN calls ivermectin horse paste, right? They call it horse paste over and over again. They lie. Then at some point, Joe Rogan calls out Sanjay Gupta, and he literally just goes in there and eats shit. He just lies and goes, I didn't know what they were saying, and they shouldn't have said that, whatever. 10 minutes later, he's back on CNN, and Don Lemon or Anderson Cooper, one of them is going, but it is horse paste, and he's going, yeah, it is.
Yeah, it was Don Lemon.
Okay, that is your window, liars who can't take your foot off the fucking accelerator, to like back off and tap the brake just for a second. But they couldn't. Really and what they've done is why should we believe these idiots? It's not horse paste. You were just called out and you went right back on your network and you just doubled down once again on a lie. They can't do it. They cannot feather the throttle. They can't touch the brake. They just can't. And it doesn't matter that they've lost all credibility and the ratings are going into the toilet. They cannot pump the brake.
Yeah. And it's another strange part about it is when this is like just again, an anecdotal story, but when COVID first happened, I happened to have a bunch of masks in a suitcase because I'd been to Asia like 2 years before, and I just had them from traveling because we had to wear them where we went. And they told us to donate our masks, that they don't work, don't use it, and give it to like a hospital or anyone that only medical workers will need it. And I did that. I happened to be very newly pregnant. I think I was like 2 months pregnant at the time. And obviously being pregnant at the beginning of COVID, you don't know what the fuck it's going to do to you or your baby, and you're freaked out. And then a few weeks later, they were like, you need to wear the mask. You have to wear the mask. And I was like, so did you lie about the mask? Did you lie about the politics of it? Did you lie about the effectiveness of it? There's a lie in here someplace because you're now saying that we actually needed it for medical workers. And I think that original lie from Dr. Fauci has been what has just spread all the distrust, all the concern. No American has been given any fucking reason to trust anyone in our higher institutions whatsoever at this point. I'm vaccinated. I did not think twice about being vaccinated. I don't have a problem with it. I believe the science, but I also understand why people are so scared. You're talking about people's bodies. You're talking about children. I have a 1-year-old. Like, I just wrote a column talking about how it's insane for us to be vaccinating children when they are not at high risk. And this is an experimental drug. And the resistance towards even just saying that is fascinating. And last time I checked, Don Lemon is not a doctor. He's not a physician. And I thought the ivermectin Joe Rogan story, not controversy, was really fascinating because it was sort of, like you said, a really classic example of politicizing medicine. And we're in whole new fucking territory now if that's what's happening. And God forbid there's another anything. I'm not going to trust the leaders in the same way that I did before, because I've been lied to a lot since it started.
Well, you bring up the mask, and it's a perfect example of not being able to take your foot off the accelerator. Kids don't need to wear masks at schools. They're not effective. They're not effective on flights. I mean, there's barely any, and that's if you wear the right kind of mask, and no one wears the right kind of mask and wears it properly, and no one wears the good mask or the bad mask properly. It's insane. They will not step back for 1 second on masking. They just won't. I live in California. They can't give it up. Now, if it's
the MAGA hat for the left, and that's not a line of mine, but it's a virtue signal of where you stand politically now.
If at some point the LA Teachers Union said, you know what, we've crunched some numbers, we looked at the data, we saw some studies out of Israel, and turns out your kids don't need to wear a mask at school tomorrow, I would go, well, at least they seem to have some nuance in their thinking, or at least they're able to reverse or go, this is what we thought during this period of time, but now we think differently now. But they don't. They just keep going. And when they just keep going, then people stop listening. And whether it's the LA City, Unified School District and masking and whatever other fakakta ordinances they're shoving up everyone's ass, or it's CNN talking about ivermectin being horse paste. At a certain point, you go, really? Do they really think this? Is this really the data? And then we get back to my age-old question, stupid or liar? So is Don Lemon stupid, or is he lying about horse paste? The answer is I don't know whether Don Lemon is stupid or lying, but I do know that he's one or the other, and then I don't have to listen to him. And it's sadly, it's getting that way with the CDC and many other, we live in Los Angeles. We have Health Director Barbara Ferrer. I have no fucking idea if she's stupid or a liar, but I don't listen to her because she was telling us that outdoor dining was dangerous 10 minutes ago.
What makes you stay in California? Because I was talking to your producer before we went on that many of my friends have left California. I think I have like 2 left. For all the normal places you already know, Texas, Arizona, Rhode Island, like just different places. What makes you stay? I
have twins that are in the 10th grade, and I shall be attending their high school graduation in a U-Haul. I'm literally pulling up in a U-Haul. I'm going to yell, congratulations, I'm gone.
Do you know where you're going to go?
I have... The beauty, it's like I used to say about Gavin Newsom when we're talking about recalling Gavin Newsom, and they'd go, who would you like? And I'd go, I would say a plastic owl that you put on top of a sign so seagulls don't shit on it. Like, it doesn't matter. Anyone, anybody but Gavin Newsom. And you go, where do you want to go? Florida? You want to go to Nashville? You want to go to Arizona? You want to go to Texas? And I go, fine. Whatever. I'm not trying to go to a better place. I'm trying to get away from a bad place. If there's a sort of a different math here. I'm trying to get out of an abusive relationship. I don't even need a new relationship. All right, let me take a quick break and hit this spot. Trico, over a century ago, Trico was the first to make wiper blades. They've been a step ahead of Mother Nature ever since. Trico engineers study your specific driving conditions, and they make sure they're ready for everything, even if it rains, cats, and dogs. Whatever the weather, Trico wipers maintain maximum windshield contact. No matter what your driving habits, you'll always find the right wiper blade for your vehicle at the right place. I have them on my vehicle. Brian has them on his. You talk to any pro, they'll tell you to go with Trico. Trico, the future wipers, since 1917, going all the way back. To find a store near you, see the latest offers, visit TricoCatsandDogs.com. That is TricoCatsandDogs.com. Back with Meghan McCain, Bad Republican, name of the memoir. It is available exclusively on Audible. And I don't know, Meghan, what your thinking is, but I feel like the pendulum is starting to kind of swing back. When Trump was in office, if you didn't burn him at effigy on your front lawn twice a week, you were considered, MAGA supporter, and you're, Hitlerian and blah, blah, blah. Trump's gone. Biden's turned out to be a shit show. And I feel like the environment is kind of changed. People can speak their mind a little more. There's more alternative outlets for voices that aren't sort of left mainstream. What is your experience of this? It had to be dramatically different 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think we're seeing it in so many different places. I think just the fact that I will watch some shows on Fox News, like I will watch like Bret Baier and a few things. I don't watch CNN. I don't watch MSNBC. I get the majority of my news from podcasts and independent sources and independent Substacks. And I think if someone like me is like, I would rather hear from Barry Weiss and Matt Taibbi and, Kamel Bowie or, whatever, or I'm sorry, Kamel Foster is my friend's name, not Kamel Bowie is another writer for the New York Times. But I don't trust the media in the way that I used to, just because I've worked in too much of it. And I think that people are really seeing behind the curtain. I think they're seeing, Oz behind the curtain and, look at what's happening in California. Like you said, the second your children graduate, you're leaving. People are fleeing these cities because I also think the summer, 2 summers ago really impacted a lot of things. I think when Americans were told that their neighborhoods could be looted and burned, and violence isn't violence, but speech is violence. It's just not a narrative that any rational person is going to accept. And it doesn't matter what is happening. People have a right to have safety and law and order in their cities and their homes. And I think people don't like being told that they have to be censored in a country that's founded on freedom. And I do see things changing and I feel it. And I think you can see it reflected in ratings of a lot of shows. I think you can see it reflected again, like here in Virginia, Biden won by 10 points, a year ago? And now it looks like Youngkin can really pull this off. Look at the tea leaves, Democrats. What are you doing that's pissing off a 2-time mom in Loudoun County that, voted for Obama twice and voted for Biden? And it's happening fast. Like it's happening much faster than I realized. But I think there's so many metrics Americans can see that this administration is a just dumpster fire so far. Everything from Afghanistan to inflation, to this like sort of emphasis on culture war issues that just aren't impacting Americans in the way that inflation is and unemployment and all this insanity with COVID becoming, everything you already said with masks and teachers unions and things of that nature. But I do feel a shift, and I think it's happening. And in all transparency, my sister-in-law, Emily, is a advisor to Kevin McCarthy, who's probably new Speaker of the House once Republicans take over. And she feels very confident that Republicans are going to have a very, very good midterm election. And I just think that Democrats have done this to themselves, and I don't feel bad for them. I do not want Trump again for a lot of different reasons. I don't want him to be the nominee. I'd like someone normal and rational to become president next. I don't think Biden is capable of running for president next. I think Kamala is the least talented politician at that level I could ever conceive of, to the point that it's almost parody. And I don't understand how she is our vice president of the United States, given her just I can't even express it. Like every clip I see of her, there was one recently of her campaigning with Terry McAuliffe, and it's uncomfortable to watch her interact with voters. So They don't have much of a bench. And well, I filibustered a little, but does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense. And when I think about Kamala Harris, I get angry. And the reason I get angry is because, and we'll kind of circle back. Yes, people are upset about supply chains and inflation and gas prices and border security and education. And the White House is talking about, announcing a pronouns day, and people, it's so tone deaf. And again, it's sort of like what we're talking about with CNN. You got to take your foot off the accelerator at some point. You can't just be talking about the transgender community and pronouns when people are trying to get out of Afghanistan. America doesn't care as much about pronouns as they do about taxes and the border and the economy. Like at some point, shift your message. The reason Kamala Harris pisses me off, not personally or individually, although I agree with you, she seems like a horrible, disingenuous person. I don't trust people that laugh too much. That's me, unless they're in the audience, in which case, God bless them. But what we did with her is we have a guy in Joe Biden who is, all reasonable people sort of admit he's lost a step and maybe two steps. Like there may not, we're not a year in and he seems fairly diminished. And, he's getting up there and he's saying, these are the questions they told me I could answer, and they're going to get mad at me if I don't. Like it's literally like talking about, sounds like what an elderly person says about living at Shady Acres. It's like he wandered out in his pajamas and he said, like, I got to go back in or I'm going to get in trouble with the nurses. Like it's crazy to have the president saying they're going to get mad at me if I answer this question, or here's the people they said I could call on, or what have you. I agree with you. No second term for Biden. And maybe we don't see the end of the first term. Waiting in the ranks is Kamala Harris, who's horrible by all accounts, except for two accounts. She's black and she's a female. So we announce we must have this. So you have the pilot on the plane who may not make the flight from LA to New York. He may flatline before we get over Texas. And you've chosen a co-pilot based on their skin color and their gender, who's not capable of flying an airplane. Well, guess who's in the fucking airplane? The rest of America.
Yeah.
And now we got to deal with this shit. Stop the affirmative action all the time. Get someone who's competent in there. Biden announced, I'm going to have a female of color. Good. You have a female of color who's not capable of running the country. And you may not make it through your term. Fantastic. Thank you.
Choices, because I know that he had made this promise that he had to have a woman of color, and I actually really liked Val Demings, and she was a former sheriff in Florida, and I thought she was like a much better choice because she just seemed more rational and had real experience. And the thing I never understood about the Kamala choice, which was ultimately the thing that really made me panic about Biden, because I thought it was such a misguided choice for all the reasons you just said. And she was a proven loser, like in the sense that she dropped out before she made it in Iowa. If anyone has seen her again on just like grassroots meat and potato politics, interacting with voters, she has no skills. I cannot believe she was elected in California. I haven't lived in California for many, many, many years, but I just don't understand. Normally, if you get to the level of being a senator, even if I disagree with you, you have talent. And she makes me very nervous. And I don't think she's, up for the task. Like you just said, I think this is a very precarious situation for Americans. I wish I love America and I want America to do well. I wish this administration would govern the way they ran. And the fear among many Republicans was that he was a Trojan horse for the progressive left. And unfortunately, that is what I'm seeing. And you're seeing it show up in his numbers. And I don't understand, if you ran as this uniter that's going to bring the country together, why you're governing this way. And it's hard. And I'm petrified of what the future holds. And I don't know, the press conferences where he's sitting and, he's like with Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson's still speaking, and the staff is screaming to get the press corps out. You and I have no television. I know politics. What is happening that you're panicking right now and you need the press to get out? Like, are you worried that he's going to say something that you don't agree with? What is, and I think people pick up on this anxiety that the White House is projecting and signaling.
Yeah. Running as the uniter and then saying Jim Crow 2.0 every 5 minutes is insane. And a last question for you, a philosophical question.
Sure.
And it's something that I kind of notice, and I wrote a book about 12 years ago called 50 Years We'll All Be Chicks, because I've noticed us kind of taking a turn for the feminine. You left the View, so you get it. There is, in my estimation, there's more and more females in politics now. And the issues have kind of turned from a kind of nuts and bolts to a sort of feelings-based issues. A lot of, certainly on the left just talks about feelings, the Squad and AOC and Kamala Harris and people. It's a lot of talking about dignity and feelings and, young people coming to this country and young mothers and stuff like that. Now, I don't want you to think this is all your equipment or your plumbing. Like, there are plenty of, Margaret Thatcher is a woman who kind of thought like a dude. If you catch my meaning. And I think of you as a woman who has kind of dude think, or a fair amount of dude think in you. And it's not a pejorative. I just mean you think more like your dad than you do like Joy Behar, for instance. Yeah. But there's definitely a wind blowing a direction, and we're definitely much more feelings-based than we were politically or as a society. Lots of talk, again, about feelings and dignity and so invisible stuff that really doesn't have anything to do with GDP or test scores or anything like that. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I mean, I hate talking about feelings a lot. I really hate it. I hate it in my personal life. When my husband and I fight, I always just want to be like, can we just get over it? We don't need to talk this out. We don't need to talk about our feelings. I'm not a terribly emotive person when it comes to things like that. So this wheelhouse of like everything is speech is violence, and I'm offended and hurt at every little thing. Is just, I think it's the background I come from and the way I was raised. Like, my brothers are in the military and have deployed a ton. And I just am surrounded by like sort of like hyper masculine men who just really don't emote that much, for better or for worse. I mean, it has its negatives too. So I don't like this everything has to be a therapy session culture that we're in. I think it's dangerous. I think our enemy not to get this too serious, but like our enemies do see this. Like when you see Ted Cruz tweeted this video, and it was the Russian military's like recruitment video, and they're like running in the snow and shirtless and like pumping iron and doing all these things. And then you see ours, and it's like, it was like something about women being in the military and being mothers, and like, that's great. Like, whatever, mothers in the military, all for it. Yes. But I would also like to talk about like fucking up terrorists, because that's what's important to me, because there's still threats everywhere. In fact, there was just one recent, like this weekend, saying that there's a very credible terrorist cell threat at the malls near around where I live. So I hate it, but I often feel, I'm a woman. I love being a woman. I'm proud of being a woman, but I don't always feel as connected to some of the more sensitive parts of being a woman. I just was like play tough, push through, there's no crying in baseball type of person. And I feel that in my politics, and I respond to politicians, men and women. And by the way, I would say that like Kirsten Sinema is a great example of that. Like there are women and like Tulsi Gabbard who,
Yes.
govern and present in a way that is more like where I'm at. I don't like it. It's interesting, like being a new parent. There's a lot of stuff that I'm really disagreeing about with like parenting advice. Again, another anecdotal story. My daughter's 1. We put her in swim lessons when she was 3, and our nanny and my husband were both like, she screamed her head off when she got in the pool and she did not want to do it and she did not want to swim. And they were like, we should take her out. She hates it so much. And I said to my husband and the swim coach, and I was like, listen, she's getting in the fucking pool and she's going to learn how to fucking swim, because you know what's worse than learning how to swim? Drowning. Fucking get in the pool. And now she can swim great. And like my parenting is like, sometimes like you have to be tough. And there's like, I don't really have time to talk about feelings all the time. I mean, of course, in some instances I can, but I do think this overly, we have to talk about our feelings all the time and everything's like a drum circle therapy session is really not my vibe at all. In politics or my personal life.
I agree. A mother, a woman, a mom who wants to fuck up terrorists. Meghan McCain,
yes,
everyone.
I do. Don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. But we do the dude thinking around here. No, I've always said I live in a town that has a mayor in Garcetti who's a dude, but thinks like a chick. And I have a governor in Gavin Newsom who is a dude technically, but he thinks like a chick. And Tulsi Gabbard is a chick who thinks like a dude. And I like dude think when it comes to governing. Bad Republican is the name of the book's available now exclusively on Audible. Meghan McCain, thank you so much for joining me today. This was very fun.
Oh, thank you so much, Adam. Really, such a pleasure to speak with you. I'm such a fan. Thank you.
Well, I'm a fan of yours, and let's not wait 13 years or whatever it is in between
it's nice
visits.
to see you again.
Yeah, and say hi to Ben for me as well. All right, let me tell you about LifeLock. Tech support scams trick you into believing something is wrong, and then they steal your personal information, tap your bank account, or install dangerous software on your device. It's important to understand how cybercrime and identity theft are affecting our lives. Every day, we put our info at risk on the internet. In an instant, cyber criminals could harm your finances and your credit. Good thing there's LifeLock. LifeLock helps detect a wide range of identity threats like your social security number for sale on the dark web. If they detect your information is out there, they will send you an alert. It's LifeLock, right, Dawson?
No one can prevent all identity theft or monitor all transactions at all businesses, but you can keep what's yours with LifeLock Identity Theft Protection. Join now and save up to 25% off your first year with promo code ADAM. Call 1-800-LifeLock or head to lifelock.com and use promo code ADAM for 25% off.
All right, I'll be in Baltimore and Philly this weekend, Magoobies, and then Keswick Theater on Saturday outside of Philly. Go to adamcarolla.com for all the live show info. And until next time, it's Adam Carolla for Meghan McCain and Greg Fitzsimmons and Gina Grad and Paul Bryan. Say it. Mahalo.
Yeah, my grandfather and my great-grandfather were famous admirals. And he could have, because he was like an admiral's son, they offered him early release and he said no.
How long did he stay after they offered him the early release? Do you remember?
I think it was like 3 years. It was a while.
Yeah. Not many would do that.